Thank you very much for coming along. My name's Eilidh Heather. I'm hosting this evening. We'll try and bring you in for a couple of questions while we're going. The format is we're exploring this place, the Kelvin Hall Moving Image Archive. So we have this amazing archive that's full of clips of all sorts of Scottish history. And what we're going to show tonight is a few clips from the archive showing broadcasting in sport. And then we'll give to our panel questions about their career, their experiences, and their thoughts on the clips that we've seen. So if it's fine with you, we'll play our first clip and use that as our first talking point. And I'm really interested in the passion. You guys all work around in the field of sport. You guys are doing Off the Ball on Sunday, BBC Sports Scotland, Sky Sports. Why is Scotland so passionate about sport in general, about football specifically, do you think, Ray?
I'll take this out so we can do it. First things first, I love the fact that we got a 10-goal thriller and you showed off highlights of a pass going out of play and no goals. What was happening, mate? Yeah, we couldn't afford the goals, so you just got all the rubbish bits. See, I find it quite interesting because I come from a different background to Jane and Eilidh, that I've done stand-up for like 15 years and then I kind of moved into sports stuff that way. And for me, I think one of the reasons to answer your question, Ali, is it's passionate because I'm a Partick Thistle fan. Don't laugh. Proper best punches. Oh, that's fine. We're like you, but without money laundering. It's good. So what happened was allegedly. We'll do that. We'll move on. But I think for me, and you'll be in a similar position. I've seen Thistle my first game was 1996. I've seen us relegated 6 times and promoted 5 times in my lifetime, but you still go back every time because I think what we do in Scotland is, whether it is football, mainly football, what we're talking about just now, but other sports too, it becomes a part of your identity, and that's why you become so passionate. I think that's what happens with it.
I'd love to ask Jane, why do you think that emerged in Scotland though? Like, why did we have 135,000 people at a game that no Scottish team was in? Rangers had been pumped in the semi-finals on the way to that. They'd been knocked out 12-4. Any Rangers fans in? Oh, no. So, like, why are we, like, Scotland has the biggest attendance per head of capita to games on a Saturday. People go to games on... Why is that, do you think?
I think we just love our football, don't we? We just love, not just like watching the 90 minutes of action, but we love everything about it. We like walking down, up the road, round the corner, whatever it may be, all wearing your colours, all singing your songs. Some songs maybe less than others. I think we're just looking at you. I think we're just passionate about it, aren't we? We're just passionate about everything about it, the build-up, the action itself, and then afterwards, because there's always talking points, isn't it? And we're even passionate about the talking points. Eilidh mentioned VAR, which is obviously causing so many talking points right now. But there was talking points at the game that we were at on Monday night, the Old Firm women's game, and we love a bit of that. And we're just so passionate about the whole thing. And whether we're watching it live, whether we're watching it on television or gathered around the radio in the good old-fashioned days, it's just, I think it's just innate in us, isn't it? It's just there, that whole love for it, and it overspills in enthusiasm. It's just there.
I think to go on top of that, sometimes what you were saying, sometimes the game's the worst part of the day. Like, it generally is when and it's that kind of camaraderie that you touched upon, that when you see people you don't see for the rest of the week. And a lot of times in life, like I've got a 3-year-old son, family time takes up a lot of times, and when you go to football, it is your time to socialise and do all that kind of stuff. So I think that plays a huge part in it as well.
I think it's community as well. I mean, the three of us up here, you've got Partick Thistle, Motherwell and St Johnstone fans here. So,
Dundee United.
Our clubs and many clubs around Scotland are so ingrained within the community. I mean, I was 7 years old and I was going to St Johnstone soccer camps, football camps. They were coming to my school in the summer holidays to put on football camps for us. You grow up with that, and that's why I think it does become part of your identity, and I think that's why that passion still exists. I work in the Premier League a lot. There is no passion. There's wonderful stadiums, fantastic football, bright shiny lights, but there's no passion. You can get a half and half scarf though.
Why do you think? Is that just purely because of a money basis, do you think?
It's a holiday, it's a day out, it's tourism, it's so different. And it has a part, obviously, because as a league, it's thriving, it's the best league in the world, it's the money, the broadcasting deals, it's just unbelievable. You go all over the world, you go to Southeast Asia, you go to Africa, it's Liverpool shirts, Man United shirts, that's what you see. and it's a huge business, but I think when something becomes a huge business, it loses a little bit of that community and a little bit of that passion and everything that, that we grew up with.
So Partick Thistle are better than Man City?
What, I mean, in certain ways.
Give me 2 pints and I will happily say that. It's fine.
What I'm really interested, because this is the Festival of Broadcasting, and that clip was watched by 70 million people. What I'm really interested in is how sport works beautifully as broadcasting. How has the broadcasting element affected the sport element? Do you think men's soccer in Scotland is so big, and it's so big around the world because it works well in broadcasting? Do you think there's been a kind of chicken and egg situation where actually the broadcasting of it has grown the sport? Or do you think the sport is just, there's something innately unbelievably popular about it?
I think it's difficult with men's football because it was already on the tellies. But I think if you look at women's football right now, you can probably see what happened in men's football maybe 60, 70 years ago, because the women's football is massive. And it has been very much helped by being broadcast on terrestrial TV. And I think the two do go hand in hand. I think the fact that the England women's team had success at the time that broadcasting was getting involved in the women's game helped as well. But if you look, I mean, I did write down the Scotland-England match that opened, well, their opening games of the World Cup in France in 2019 had over 6 million people watching it in the UK. I mean, that would have been unheard of 10 years ago. So I think broadcasting grows the sport, and women's football is growing faster than any other women's sport. Mm-hmm. So broadcasting does help, but I do think the two go hand in hand. So I think probably that's what happened in men's football, because it didn't happen in rugby, it didn't happen in golf.
Would you agree with that, Jane?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you also see it with other sports as well, when the Commonwealth Games are on and the Olympics are on, and you see all these sports that you don't normally see, like table tennis, taekwondo, on the television all the time. People get engrossed in it, and they like Wimbledon's a prime example as well. You see tennis on the television for 2 weeks and people are out playing in the courts, and then they get absolutely just like taken over by that. And that's the power of broadcasting, really, isn't it? If that wasn't on the television, people wouldn't be as so taken by it, I don't think. So I think broadcasting is massive. It's accessibility. It's putting the sports people out there, isn't it? And you just get so caught up with it. And without it, I think it would be a different beast. You'd be watching, definitely.
I think money talks as well, because we're talking about, it's been brilliant over the last few years. Like, I was in a pub in London and people were chatting about Beth Mead and the Euros, the World Cup coming up in New Zealand. And I was like, that didn't happen 3-4 years ago. So that's kind of changed, but it's all because of a lot of it is sponsorships, putting money behind things and putting it more prominent. So to go back to the original question, I think one of the reasons that men's football at that time was because it was pushed, and then some people got involved, a little bit of money, and then you saw everything change in 1992 when the Premier League got established in Sky. And now when you think about it, I do Sky Sports News every now and then. That's a 24-hour rolling sports show about everything, which wouldn't have happened when we were growing up. So that's changing. The focus, everything's become a bit more, like you said, accessible pretty much because it's right in front of you.
For your likes of Hamilton and Partick Thistle, so my team Dundee United got relegated a few years ago and we stayed doing the championship for a while.
Yeah, it was really funny.
But we fell off the broadcasting radar. Like, no being featured on things like open all mics on a Saturday really impacted my ability to follow my club. And it also took away the narrative. Like, broadcasting ties you into the narrative of the wider league much more. Like, when you're on, Sports Scene at the weekend and you go and watch your game, and then you head home and watch the highlights, you see where you are in the whole league table, and it brings the whole thing into kind of an ecosystem. And it reminds you of the broader competition. Because it's not just, that's just pumped off Aberdeen again. It's, that's us near the drop zone, and here's the other teams playing better than us. Like, there's the striker we just loaned out scoring 2. Yeah, brutal, absolutely brutal. But you're right, so let's take it back to broadcasting for yourselves. Obviously, you're all very prominent in what you do. Who were the people in broadcasting that were doing a good job? And who are the broadcasters, I'll start with yourself, that really inspired you to get involved in this?
I think this is also one of the things why broadcasting helps sport, because it creates heroes and idols. And for me, anybody who's ever read anything about my backstory, I watched Hazel Irvine present Grandstand for the first time she'd ever sat in that seat. And Grandstand was the greatest Saturday sports programme of my childhood. I mean, if you weren't going to the football on a Saturday, you were in front of the TV from 12 till 6 watching sport. And it was always... most of the time I remember it being men and being English voices that I heard. So to see a Scottish woman on Grandstand, that I just sat there and went, that's what I want to do when I grow up. So Hazel Irvine for me was the one that I looked at and said, if she can do that, I didn't see a difference between her and me in terms of the way we spoke, in terms of being female, in terms of where we came from. There wasn't a great difference. So that was my inspiration to be able to go and try and follow that career path. And that is what a lot of people get, sports people get through broadcasting as well.
Massively. That's a great point. Representation is so important for that. It's transformative for people like yourself. Jane?
Yeah, very much the same as Eilidh. Hazel was a massive role model for me as well. Also Helen Rawlinson, who was on the scene just a little bit before Hazel, who sadly passed away when she was quite youngish, and I'm sure she would have been still very much flourishing and on the scene had she not passed away. And people like Eleanor Aldroyd, the Five Live, they were very much at the kind of forefront when that started out. And again, it was a female voice. It was someone who you identified with, and it just made, you turned on the radio and you were like, all right, that's a female voice, and it jumped out because there weren't many.
It still cuts through.
Yeah, absolutely, and they were knowledgeable and they knew their stuff and they were respected, and that was very obvious too. So that was really important. The other one for me as well was Des Lynam, who I just thought was just Mr. Relaxed and calm and just made it look so easy. And as we all know, it's not easy, to be honest. But yeah, he was a bit of a role model of mine as well. But yeah.
What happened the first time you two met Hazel Irvine? Did you fangirl? What happened?
Yeah, I actually I used to work for STV, and she was still working for BBC Scotland at the time, which was before she went down to London. And I met her at I think it was Hibs training or something, the glamour of the job. And I just like, oh, there's Hazel. and she was just lovely, just so nice. She came over to me, and she was just really lovely, encouraging, and just everything you wanted her to be. She was great. And actually to this day, when you see her, she doesn't live locally anymore, but when you see her at the golf or wherever you might see her, very very occasionally in this day and age, she'll always stop and talk, and she's just amazing, isn't she? You'll know her better than me, Eilidh.
Did you cry, Eilidh? That's what we want to know.
No, so I was working on the snooker world championship. So I used to do some of the sort of behind the scenes assistant producer type role at the snooker. And I actually wrote Hazel a letter when I was 14 years old, asking her. I know this is
too old, isn't it?
14. Well, that was when I had to actually make my decision on what my future was going to be. It felt like, but no, I mean, I must have been about 13 when she presented Grandstand the first time. So 14, I wrote her a letter and asked her for some advice how to follow her career path, and she actually did write back, which was amazing. So I'd managed to get through about however long the World Championships is, like 2 weeks or something, off passing her, saying hello, and everything, and then the last night, I think with a couple of little Dutch courage wines, I said to Hazel, I was like, I wrote you a letter when I was 14. And she went, I hope I wrote back. And then, you did. So that was really nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
We're talking about representation. Yeah, she is. We're talking about representation being so important. Was there any gingers to look up to in broadcasting?
Yeah, Dougie Donnelly.
No, genuinely. So, when you were coming through, because you have that stand up and sport.
Yeah, but what I remember, even now, if you bump into someone like Rob McLean, who commentated on pretty much every major football match I watched when I was younger, or I remember, so I would have been 10 when Scotland qualified for France 98, and McCoy's the Macaulay, and I've always kind of liked making people laugh, and I saw Fred Macaulay and do a show with Ali McCoy interviewing Ewan McGregor and having pints, and I was like, that's what I want to do. That looks amazing. And now
that's your intersection. That's where you
chat
are.
To Fred about it, he's like, I can't remember. I was pissed. I don't know. So something like that. And I think what's always been really good about Scottish media, whether it's I grew up listening to Off the Ball when I was going to Scotland Thistle games, or even any kind of Radio Scotland, or people like Rob McLean, even YouTube, it's accessible because they're people that are like you, and it's not like in some other sports where you can see people who've come from a totally different background for you, and you cannot relate to them. Whereas most of them, you're just like, oh, that's that guy that got lucky, and now he does this. It's great.
Yeah, like the elephant polo commentators and that kind of thing. But I would ask, so something I thought, like, because Scotland's such a big island place, the Highlands is quite distant from Hampden. So broadcasting has been vital for people, for your likes of Wick or like Orkney or the Hebrides, to actually experience their national team. And for a long, long, long time, you could watch Scotland on free-to-air television. And these days, it is principally on paid television. Like, what was it, Viaplay? It's been on the last couple of games. And so if you kind of get to Hampden, which is difficult, like I came down from Dundee for the games, and when I was on the way back up the road, you had boys going all the way back up to Thurso who'd sit off at like 5 a.m. But so broadcasting, now that we have put it behind the paywall, has that removed the ability for the whole nation to get behind the team? Because you have that thing of Tuesday was the biggest result ever. I don't think it emanated out as widely through society as if it was on free telly. Like, you know, the Euros that was on, like, they're wheeling tellies into classrooms and everyone was shutting down to watch that.
To watch David Marshall get chipped from 60 yards. Teach him the hard way.
6-year-olds finding out what it means to be Scotland. Yeah. But yeah, so like
I think the
microphone, please.
Sorry, it's just it's changed days though, isn't it? I mean, it's not just a television. Obviously, is everyone will gravitate towards that because football is so visual. But the game was live on Sports Sound, just to give Sports Sound a wee plug. And we were talking about this morning actually. That the listening figures for Sports Sound were phenomenal on Tuesday night. The online figures were something like 3 million people read the match report.
So that's what I was doing.
Which so I mean that's phenomenal.
Just him refreshing while on stage.
So thanks to Ray. So I mean there's so many different ways you can digest your sports live viewing, and obviously television is a major player, but with digital and radio as well, you can. I think it is pretty accessible, but I totally take your point about the kind of free to air. Like
the family sitting around the telly would still happen, I think, for a Scotland game. Like it's not a dead thing. The idea of sitting around the telly. What do you make of that? Make all telly free to air?
I have a foot in both camps because I work for the BBC and I work for Sky Sports.
Sure.
But
we're not here to criticise it. We're not here to criticise it. It's just that
I technically work for neither, so I'll give you mine in a minute. So you're okay.
But no, it's that thing of like what are the advantages and disadvantages to having it paid for?
I think I would always rather sport be on free to air telly. Always, 100%. All sports. I do a lot of work in golf, and the BBC has decided.
You can keep that.
The BBC has decided that it's not really interested in golf. So golf is very much hidden now. Football is different because you can go to every bar, and on Tuesday night, bars will have had, even if they had to pay for like one night, they would have had it on in a bar. So, but you can't really go to a bar and watch the Masters or the Open and sit there all day and watch it. So golf has become hidden away, and that is not going to help a sport that needs visibility. And I think that's the same with a lot of different sports. So I would always want sport to be on free to air, but the problem is free to air broadcasters can't pay the subscription fee. So if you want the money to go into the sport, you have to sell it to the highest bidder. And ultimately at the moment, and I know there's a lot of discussion about this new Scottish football contract with Sky Sports, ultimately nobody else put the money up. So what are you meant to do?
No, I completely hear you. What would you say the advantage are to the Scotland national team being on paid for television? Is there money that flows from that into the setup?
I think that's from my person, to go back to the first one, I think national games should always be on free to air TV. Rugby, men's football, women's football, everything. The Six Nations always is, but sometimes they do autumn internationals and they put them in Amazon and things like that. I think that always should be, because you're talking about the Euros there. Think about how many people, because I was one of 9,000 people at Hampden to watch us lose 2-0 to the Czech Republic. Think how many people who couldn't get there because of COVID registration or whatever regulations watched that game and got engaged. So my wee boy at the time was about 18 months old, and I took him down to Scotstoun for some football, and I have never seen so many kids wearing Scotland strips in my life, ever. And I was like, right, okay, they've been engaged. How do you keep that? And if, I suppose, midweek kickoffs aren't the best for a 6-year-old to watch Scotland, whatever, but if it's a 2:00 kickoff on a Saturday, like it was on Saturday there, and you can't watch it, or you have to take your kid to a pub to watch it, that's an odd kind of juxtaposition thing.
How many folk watched the Old Firm women's game on Monday? That's fine. So I was in England on Monday, I'm sorry to say, and I was in a gym in the evening, and it was the Old Firm Celtic Rangers was on the English telly on Sky, showing a women's game of football. That's the first time I've seen Scottish women's football outside of Scotland, and it was a really good game. It was really interesting. But guys, first of all, talk us through how that game ended up on Sky. And then talk us through. There was a bit of incident, so talk us through that. Because if you've not seen it, you might have missed this. It was great crack.
I'm not 100% sure how it ended up on Sky as such, but I'm pretty sure it's something to do with now the SWPL, which is the women's top tier and second tier, are now under the umbrella of the SPFL. So the men's and women's all come under the SPFL. So part of the broadcast deal is to now show a certain number of SWPL games. So Sky Sports sponsor the League Cup now. So it is the Sky Sports Cup. So the first game shown on Sky was the Sky Sports Cup final, which was I say a couple of months ago. It could have been anything from 4 weeks ago to about 12 weeks ago. But that was a really good occasion as well. And then the first league game on Monday night between Celtic and Rangers. Both of them pretty much out of the title race, but definitely needed to win to give themselves a little glimmer of potentially catching Glasgow City. But certainly there's a second Champions League spot. So there was a lot at stake. And Rangers were winning 1-0. 90th minute, 6 minutes of added time come up. Rangers get a really bad injury. So there's another few minutes added on. 99th minute, Celtic equalise. The benches all kick off, the final whistle goes, and the Rangers assistant manager essentially headbutted the Celtic head coach.
From behind, which is old school as well.
Yeah.
Old school.
It was madness, like madness.
So what was interesting is you covered the game and you covered the game. You guys showed that.
We had to.
You guys didn't show it. Yeah. So that's the Tuesday is the highlights package.
Yeah, so we normally do highlights from the studio, and if we had been in the studio, we absolutely would have shown that. But we were recording our links from the ground for reasons I actually don't even know what the reasons were. So that's what we were doing, and we didn't see it. We didn't see it, and we were not aware of it at all. We'd done all our interviews and we weren't aware of it. It is a bit of a bone of contention with me, because I think when we did find out about it, we should have redone the interviews, but that's above my pay grade to make that decision. Although I did try and fight, but I was shouted down.
The Rangers assistant manager.
It
was also his birthday.
Yeah.
It was just an added twist that, and I don't know why that
I know.
had something.
So that's why we didn't cover it. But we should have done. To be perfectly honest,
I was massively.
It's a massive talking point. Obviously, we need to be quite careful because Police Scotland are now involved in the investigation, so we probably shouldn't be talking about it as openly as we are. But yeah, listen.
Don't tell anyone.
I mean, I remember a few years back when Ali McCoist and Neil Lennon had that set to on the sidelines, and there was a parliamentary debate about it and all sorts. But there was a little bit of obviously news coverage the following day, but it seems to have kind of died down a little bit now. And everyone's talking about the football, which is the best thing.
Yeah, I would say from the Sky Sports game, like, I'm interested in this because I go and see the Dundee United women's team most Sundays when I'm in Dundee, and it's competitive and it's interesting, but it's very clearly an us and them split already in the women's game, where the Glasgow teams, Glasgow City, Celtic, Rangers, are significantly better.
Well,
and
they're all full time compared.
Of course,
to
there's very good reasons for them being significantly better, but I'm worried. With the broadcasting also coming in, is that likely to grow those teams at a faster rate than the likes of Dundee United can grow, and we'll end up left behind there as well?
I don't know how the money splits, but I don't think at this stage it will.
I don't think the money is. I don't know how much we pay for the rights for the highlights. I don't know how much Sky would pay. I'd be willing to bet it's not huge amounts of money. It's a slow burn, and there, it will get more as obviously it's like a vicious circle, isn't it? You throw more money at it, the quality gets better, so the broadcasters are more interested, so then more sponsorship comes along, and so it goes on. But I think right now, I think the money will be.
Yeah, I think what it will help is obviously it's the same in England in the WSL as well. The teams that are at the top and down there, it's the Chelseas, Arsenals, Man Uniteds at the moment. They're the teams that are highest funded by essentially the clubs. So essentially the men's team. How much money the men's team are willing to put into the women's team determines how strong the women's team can be. And the more Glasgow City is a different entity because it doesn't have a men's team. It's all on its own. But the more coverage they
there's
get,
a lot more heritage
Celtic
as well
get,
over
Rangers
the
get,
last-
yeah, the more coverage that they get, again, the more sponsorship, and therefore the more money the women's team can generate themselves.
If you want to talk about broadcasting, though, I think it's been really interesting placing that game and the Champions League quarterfinals this week on an international men's break, because where was it? I was coming back to London last night and I went to my phone and everyone was talking about the Chelsea-Lyon game. Everyone was talking about it. And if there also had maybe been men's Champions League weeks, the viewership is half or quarters of that. So that's an interesting step to build the game. But just talking
finding
about
those gaps, yeah. So at Dundee United, I'm not sure if you were there yourself, man, but when there's been international breaks or whatever, we've put women in Tannadice. We put the women's team on the grass pitch and got a good sort of 900,000 people, which is not a bad attendance at all for, you'll not believe it, but Dundee United are pretty much at the bottom of the league. And this is the next point I want to move on to with the women's game in particular. You've talked about as female broadcasters, and like yous are at the top of your game. But like you said, there was Hazel that came before that like said that can be done. For women's football now, do you think that we'll see like the broadcasters showing these games? Do you think we'll see a wave of female players come through? But I'm also really interested in female fans.
Can I answer it before I mansplain? I'll let these two check. But just
tell me what you reckon they think.
An exact example of this is my wee boy's nursery. One of his nursery teachers knows I do some work with the Scotland's women's teams through a Marks and Spencer's thing I do, and she's been called up to Scotland under 15 squad, and she said, "Can you get me a couple of messages from players?" So I did, and she was like, "You have no idea what that means to them," because it's that role model thing. And it's players like Jenny Beattie, who I grew up knowing. So I went to school with her sister. So I've known her all my life. And she actually once went up for a header with my wee brother and knocked him out. But that's a different story. Yeah. So when you hear that, you're like, yeah, that happened. But when I remember Jenny playing in the boys' team at school for ages and joining Celtic when she was about 12 or 13 and doing that. And now, 20 years later, it's less than 20 years, there's a total different pathway. So I think you are going to develop a lot more female fans, but also more importantly, those female role models. Because you look at players like Rose Riley, who, if you ever get a chance, watch any documentary on her, absolutely fascinating person, but she had to emigrate to have the chances that people are having now. Sorry.
She had to cut her hair as well, didn't she?
Yeah. So did I.
Yeah, I think the role model thing is massive. I've got two daughters, so having strong female role models is really important for me from their point of view, in all walks of life, but certainly sport, because they're quite sporty. And my youngest daughter used to play football. She still does for the school, and she loves Erin Cuthbert, and every time she had to pick her top for our team, it was the number 22 without any question. And that's just by seeing Erin Cuthbert on the television wearing the number 22. That's where that comes from, and it's so important. And she doesn't know much about Erin Cuthbert. She knows she plays down south. She has actually had her photograph taken with her because she was a mascot for a Scotland game a few years back. But she doesn't know the ins and outs of her, but she knows she wears number 22, and that's just brilliant.
I'm really interested as well in. I went along to the Dundee United Partick Thistle women's game. Was it 2 Sundays ago? 1-0, brutal game of football. But it was my girlfriend who's from Ireland. It was her first game of football. She's never come to a man's game, right? So she came up. There's maybe a crowd of 150, say. We're just building up a new stadium for the women, so there'll be like proper seats and all that soon. But she turned up and she was really sceptical. Within 4 minutes, a Dundee United midfielder, I would describe as like a relatively petite, quite sort of good-looking, feminine-looking player, picked up a Partick Thistle player and dumped her on her shoulder and stood over going, what the f*** are you going to do about it? And it was so aggressive. And my girlfriend was like, this is class. This is so exciting. Because it is like, and the fact that it was like at Tannadice on a men's game, you're talking 75% of the crowd will be men. Something like that. Yeah, it's about as high as that. I remember, because I used to work at United, the season tickets were about that. Whereas at the women's game, it was a much higher split of women just coming along and women bringing their daughters along and that kind of thing. And the whole support feels very different. It feels like a, dare I say, a safer, a more healthy environment to bring a daughter into, to bring a woman into.
I went to Scotland, Jamaica just before the World Cup in 2019. And I remember sitting there with my wife and we were talking about how I've never seen a audience like this or a crowd like this. And then so there's I think 4,000 were at that game. Then I went to the playoff against Ireland, 2.5 times that. more, and you can just see the engagement growing and growing and growing. And I think it's only going to get bigger when you have the likes of Caroline Weir playing and scoring for Real Madrid.
Yes.
That doesn't happen on the other side.
And yeah, and also here in the Sky Sports game, because I was watching it on the telly this time on Monday night, and the crowd sounding so feminine. Like when they're screaming for things, it sounds like sort of 5,000 women screaming instead of like 5,000 men screaming. So how do you think the broadcasting will change the people that are coming on to support? And are you guys aware as broadcasters that your audience is more likely to be female? Are you trying to speak to a slightly different audience when you are broadcasting?
I don't think so. I just speak to a football audience because for me it's just football, and I think that's something that in the women's game, perhaps I don't think so much now, but I think perhaps previously when it started to come on the screens, it was very much there was an element of just being over positive, if you like. We have to criticise when mistakes are made. We have to say that goal that Rangers scored the other night, it was a complete defensive mistake. And you can't sit there and say, oh, well, that was a great finish. It wasn't. The defender took it out the keeper's hands and it was a tap-in. It was a mistake, a defensive mistake. And I think you need to remember that it is still football. You're still speaking to an educated audience, and you're still speaking to a football audience. And what you want people who watch football. You want people who engage in the men's game to engage in the women's game as well. So you still need to have that. You have an element of educating on the league, on the teams, on the players, because that's not known. But the game of football's known. So you still, I think, have to treat it in much the same way, and celebrate it when there's success, but also criticise in the way that you would do in any other sport that you're watching when mistakes are made.
You guys obviously go out and broadcast. I think we've all been very nice. Where's the worst place? Where's the worst stadium to go and do a broadcast from?
And why is it Firhill?
Do you not see how lovely it looked up in the 70s?
So I base my answers to these kinds of questions on things like how far away the parking is, how good the food is pre-match, how far the view I've got from the press box, and how far and everything away. So it's going to come as a massive surprise, but Anfield is an absolute pain. And once you're in, it's amazing because the atmosphere is brilliant and everything, but the car park's miles away. It takes you about 40 minutes to walk to the media entrance. You've got to go up 6 flights of stairs to then get from the media room to first world problems here. Yeah. Big time.
I kind of probably base my answer on if you need to get down on your hands and knees to put in a plug socket, to plug in your charger or your ISDN kit, which is the kit we use to broadcast, then it's a no-go. In St Mirren, oh my Lord. It's a new stadium, and there's hardly any space between the seats, and you literally have to get down on your hands and knees to put in the plug.
I'm also going to get in your good books because that pillar at Dens Park.
Yes.
Oh my God, you can't see one of the goals.
Yeah, we should knock it down.
You have to make a decision on which goal you want to see.
Actually, at Tannadice, when you go up to where you sit for the radio gantry,
phenomenal view,
great view, but you've got to climb up this sugary ladder, which God knows how it gets past any kind of health and safety.
Very defendable in a siege.
But when you've got a bag on and you're carrying your kit, it's really quite dangerous. You need to have a word with them about it.
It's our main priority this season. Sorting out the broadcaster's hatch.
Most people ask what the best stadium is. Who was it asked that? You went for worst. Yeah.
In terms of stand-up, no one wants to hear about the best gigs. You want to hear about the bad ones. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Anfield's still a good gig, so I should probably take that one away. But
I was in hospitality in Anfield, and I didn't think it was that great. Like the view was just dead cramped. So that was the only time I've been there. But
truly first world problems. I'd love to ask, just quickly going along the panel, what big change do you see coming in broadcasting? As the media landscape continues to shift, we've developed massively since the 60s. What do you reckon the one big shift that we're going to see in the next 15 years will be?
I think streaming platforms, probably.
Yeah.
I know there's a little bit of an element of it with Amazon Prime, but when Amazon have their Premier League little chunks when they put them, I think we're going to see you're going to be able to just pick what game you want to watch. Every single game will be broadcast. You can pick what one you want to watch. And also holograms. I can't wait for holograms. I've seen them done where you do, the post-match interview. So I'll be in the studio and the player will be in the stadium, whatever, and they hologram the player into the studio. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it looks a bit freaky though, doesn't
But
it?
I'm wondering, will you ever be able to watch the game of football in hologram, like on your table?
Oh, that's what you want.
That is...
Now we're dreaming.
Yeah, that's the ultimate. I think Eilidh's right. I think streaming is going to be massive, and it's not just going to be about all the different games you can watch, but you're going to be able to watch it like from the corner flag, or you're going to be able to watch it if you're like in the away stand or the home stand or whatever.
Bring back player cam.
It's going to be all that, and technology's only growing, isn't it? And no VAR, which we've talked about, but it's developing all the time. But yeah, I think that's going to be the massive thing. The streaming platforms are now not just creeping in, but they've been there for the last couple of seasons, and I think that's going to get really, really big.
Because other countries already do it. So when you go to Australia, there's the NRL, the Rugby League app, and you can watch every game in that if you pay. I think in the future, you might not see Eilidh Barbour every football game. I don't know if that might happen at some point, potentially, I don't know.
It's already happened.
Yeah, it's already,
well, it's already happened.
I don't know, I'm fascinated by it all and how it's going to work, because even in the last 3 years, Zoom has changed so much about the way you can interview people in press conferences and things like that. So these guys will be better. No, but technology is going to have a huge impact. I hate the idea of them playing on a table in front of you. Imagine you're drunk watching that, trying to like knock them over and stuff. It's not going to be good.
No, that sounds absolutely brilliant.
I know, talking of apps, so just very quickly, the Masters is this week, and it has the greatest sports app I've ever seen. You can watch every single shot from every single player for every single day of the tournament. And I just wonder, is that is maybe somewhere that we'll see broadcasting going down, where you can say, I want to watch every player's goal or every pass or every whatever. You might be able to do something like that. But honestly, when it starts on Thursday, get that app. It's amazing. It's free to download. I mean, I'm not on commission or anything. It's just amazing. It's just amazing.
Oh, well, guys, thank you so much. Thank you very much to our panel here. That's Eilidh Barbour, Jane Lewis and Ray Bradshaw. And thank you very much for joining us at the Festival of Broadcasting.